The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Highway 99 in central California, painting the asphalt in shades of amber and gold. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline and hot rubber as four motorcycles rumbled into the parking lot of Jimmy's Gas and Go, a weathered truck stop that had seen better days. The neon sign flickered intermittently, struggling against the approaching dusk. Jack's teller swung his leg over his bike, stretching his back as the engine's rumble faded to silence. The leather of his cut, the vest that marked him as part of his motorcycle club, creaked as he moved. His blonde hair was matted from hours under his helmet, and his blue eyes scanned the surroundings with the practiced vigilance of someone who'd learned never to let his guard down completely. "Man, my back is killing me," Marcus Shane Doyle groaned, dismounting his own bike. Marcus was built like a bear, broad-shouldered and imposing, with a thick beard that had started going gray at the edges. Despite his intimidating appearance, his brown eyes held a warmth that betrayed his gentle nature. That's what happens when you're pushing 50 and still riding like you're 25. Ethan Cole Rivera laughed, pulling off his helmet to reveal close-cropped dark hair and a face marked by a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a souvenir from his days in the Marines. Ethan was the strategic thinker of the group, always 3 steps ahead. Nathan Patrick O'Brien, the youngest of the 4 at 32, was already heading toward the convenience store entrance. His red hair caught the fading sunlight, and his athletic build moved with easy confidence. "I'm getting coffee. Anyone want anything?" "Make it 2, Jax called out, reaching for his wallet. "Black, no sugar." The gas station was typical of hundreds scattered across California's Central Valley, a lonely outpost serving the endless stream of travelers moving between nowhere and somewhere else. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for an 18-wheeler parked at the far end and a battered sedan that had seen better decades. Jax was about to follow Nathan inside when he heard it, a sound that made him freeze mid-step. It was soft, almost lost beneath the distant hum of highway traffic, but unmistakable once you knew what you were hearing. The sound of a child crying, trying desperately not to be heard. His eyes tracked the sound to the side of the building, where the dumpsters sat in their designated area. There, pressed against the grimy wall as if trying to disappear into it, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old, with sandy brown hair that stuck up in odd directions and clothes that looked like they'd been slept in. But it was the boy's eyes that struck Jax. Wide, terrified, and far too old for such a young face. "Hey," Jax said softly, approaching slowly with his hands visible, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. "You okay, kid?" The boy's head snapped up, and for a moment, Jax thought he might bolt. The child's whole body tensed, muscles coiling for flight. But then their eyes met, and something passed between them. A recognition of sorts, though they'd never seen each other before. "Please," the boy whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, I need help." Jax knelt down, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. Up close, he could see what the distance had hidden. The purple-yellow bruise blooming along the boy's jaw, barely concealed by the dirt on his face. The way he held his left arm suggested it hurt. The knees of his jeans were torn and bloodied, as if he'd been running and falling, running and falling. "What's your name?" Jax asked, keeping his voice gentle despite the anger already building in his chest. "Tyler," the boy said. "Tyler Benjamin Hayes." "Okay, Tyler, I'm Jax. These are my friends." He gestured as Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan emerged from the store, immediately sensing something was wrong. They approached cautiously, arranging themselves to shield the boy from view of the parking lot without crowding him. "Can you tell me what happened?" Tyler's lower lip trembled. "My stepdad, I can't go back there. Please." Don't make me go back there. Marcus crouched down too, his massive frame somehow making him seem even gentler. Nobody's going to make you do anything, son. But we need to understand what's going on. Are you hurt? As if the question had unlocked something, Tyler's composure shattered. Tears streamed down his face, cutting clean tracks through the dirt. He hits me, all the time. And my mom, she's too scared to stop him. Today, he pushed me down the stairs because I forgot to take out the trash. I got up and ran. I've been running for hours. Jax felt the familiar rage building, the kind that had gotten him into trouble countless times before. But he forced it down, forced himself to think clearly. This wasn't about what he wanted to do. This was about what needed to be done. The right way. "Where do you live, Tyler?" Ethan asked, his tactical mind already working through options. "Morrison Street, the blue house with the broken fence. Number 42. "That's what? About 8 miles from here?" Nathan calculated. Kid must have been running for a long time. Jax pulled out his phone. "We need to call the police, get Child Protective Services involved." "No!" Tyler's hand shot out, grabbing Jax's wrist with surprising strength. "Please, no police. Last time someone called them, Derek, that's my stepdad. Derek told them I was clumsy, that I fell a lot. They believed him. And after they left, The boy couldn't finish. But he didn't need to. The 4 men exchanged looks. They all knew how the system could fail, how abusers could manipulate it, how sometimes the very people meant to protect children ended up delivering them right back into harm's way. "We still have to do this right," Jax said. But his mind was already working through alternatives. "But maybe we do it smart. Ethan, you still have that contact at CPS? The one who helped with your niece?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Sandra Mitchell. She's good people. Actually gives a damn. Call her. Explain the situation. See if she can meet us somewhere neutral, somewhere Tyler feels safe." "What about the stepdad?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying an edge that suggested exactly what he thought should happen to Derek Morrison. "One thing at a time," Jax said, though part of him shared Marcus's sentiment. "Right now, we make sure Tyler is safe. Everything else comes after." Tyler was watching them with something like hope dawning in his eyes. "You're really going to help me?" Jax reached out and gently ruffled the boy's hair. "Yeah, kid. We're really going to help you. I promise." As Nathan went to get water and some food from the convenience store, and Ethan stepped away to make his calls, Jax sat down on the curb next to Tyler. The boy leaned against him tentatively, as if testing whether this safety was real or just another illusion that would shatter. "How long has this been going on?" Jax asked quietly. "Since Derek married my mom. About 2 years. It wasn't so bad at first. He was nice, even. But then..." Tyler's voice trailed off. "Then he showed his true colors." Tyler nodded. "My real dad died when I was 6. Construction accident. Mom was so sad for so long. When she met Derek, she smiled again. I thought he was going to take care of us. Instead, he just took over. Mom can't do anything without asking him. She can't see her friends. Can't even talk to my grandma without him listening. And if I do something wrong..." He touched the bruise on his jaw unconsciously. Jax felt his hands clenching into fists and forced them to relax. This was exactly the kind of situation that made him question everything. His past choices, his present path, his future possibilities. Here was a kid who needed help, real help, and the system designed to protect him had already failed once. Nathan returned with water, a sandwich, and a bag of chips. Tyler devoured the food like he hadn't eaten in days, which, Jax suspected, might not be far from the truth. Abusers often used food as a weapon of control. Ethan came back 15 minutes later, his expression cautiously optimistic. Sandra can meet us at Memorial Hospital in Bakersfield. She's calling ahead to have them prepare a private examination room. She said the key is documenting everything properly this time. Photos, medical records, Tyler's statement given to her directly. She's also bringing someone from the DA's office who specializes in domestic violence cases. How long until they can be there? Jax asked. An hour, maybe 90 minutes. Jax looked at Tyler. You okay with that? Going to the hospital? Talking to these people? I know it's scary, but they're going to help make sure you never have to go back to Derek. Tyler's jaw set, with a determination that seemed far too mature for his age. Will you come with me? Every step of the way, Jax promised. All of us will. As they prepared to leave, Marcus made a quiet observation. The stepdads probably reported him missing by now. Could be a whole thing. Let it be a thing, Jax said. Let Derek Morrison sweat for a while, wondering where Tyler went, wondering if, maybe, finally, there will be consequences. They decided to put Tyler in Marcus's truck, which Marcus kept for situations where hauling something more than his bike could carry was necessary. It was safer and more comfortable than trying to figure out how to transport a child on a motorcycle. Jax rode alongside, with Ethan and Nathan flanking them, forming a protective convoy. As they pulled onto the highway, Tyler watched the landscape roll by with wide eyes. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange, pink, and purple. The agricultural fields stretched endlessly on both sides of the highway, dotted with farmhouses and the occasional small town. I've never been this far from home before, Tyler said quietly to Marcus. Well, Marcus replied with a gentle smile. Sometimes getting far from a bad place is the first step to finding a good one. The drive to Bakersfield took 40 minutes. Jax used the time to make his own calls, including one to his best friend and lawyer, Connor James Fitzgerald. Connor had helped the club navigate legal waters more times than Jax could count, and while he specialized in criminal defense, he had connections throughout California's legal system. You're doing the right thing, Connor said after Jax explained the situation. But be careful. If this goes sideways, if the stepdad has connections or resources, this could get complicated. Document everything. Make sure CPS follows proper protocol. And Jax? Don't do anything stupid. When have I ever done anything stupid? Jax asked with a slight smile. Do you want that list alphabetically or chronologically? Despite the tension, Jax laughed. Point taken. We're doing this by the book. That'll be a first. I'll be on standby if you need me. Memorial Hospital's emergency entrance was bathed in the harsh fluorescent lights that seemed universal to medical facilities. Sandra Mitchell was waiting for them. A woman in her mid-40s with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing business casual clothes and carrying a well-worn briefcase. Next to her stood a younger woman, late 30s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen too much of humanity's darkness. I'm Sandra Mitchell, and this is Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Lynn Foster, Sandra said, approaching as Marcus helped Tyler out of the truck. Her eyes immediately went to the visible bruises on the boy's face, and something hardened in her expression. Tyler, I'm here to help you. Nobody is going to hurt you anymore. Okay? Tyler looked at Jax, who nodded encouragingly. It's okay. She's one of the good ones. Inside the hospital, they were led to a private examination room in a quiet wing away from the chaos of the main ER. A pediatric doctor, Dr. Helen Marie Carson, was waiting. She was kind-faced, with silver hair and the gentle demeanor of someone who'd devoted her life to caring for children. Tyler, I'm going to examine you and take some pictures of your injuries, Dr. Carson explained. It might be a little uncomfortable, but I promise I'll be as gentle as possible. You can have someone stay with you if you'd like. Tyler immediately reached for Jax's hand. Can he stay? Of course. The examination took nearly an hour. Dr. Carson documented every bruise, every cut, every indication of abuse. There were more than anyone had initially realized. Bruises in various stages of healing covering Tyler's back, ribs, and legs. Marks that suggested he'd been grabbed forcefully, repeatedly. The X-rays showed 2 healed fractures in his left arm that had never been properly treated. Rebecca Foster's jaw grew tighter with each revelation. "This is beyond simple assault," she said quietly to Sandra and Jax outside the examination room. "This is systematic, prolonged child abuse. With this documentation, I can file for an emergency protective order tonight and have arrest warrants issued for Derek Morrison by morning." "What about the mother?" Jax asked. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "That's more complicated. If she's also a victim of domestic violence, and from what Tyler described, it sounds like she is, we need to approach this carefully. She might be a witness, or she might face charges for failure to protect. It depends on the circumstances." Sandra added, "I'll be conducting a home visit first thing tomorrow. The priority is ensuring Tyler's safety and beginning the process of finding appropriate placement." "Placement?" Tyler's voice came from the doorway. He'd changed into hospital scrubs while his clothes were being held as evidence. "What does that mean?" Sandra knelt down. "It means finding you somewhere safe to stay while we sort everything out. Usually, that's a foster home. I don't know anyone. I'll be with strangers." The fear was back in Tyler's eyes. "What about other family?" Jax asked. "Grandparents? Aunts? Uncles?" Tyler's face brightened slightly. "My grandma. My mom's mom, Judith Ann Hayes. She lives in Sacramento. She's always wanted me to visit, but Derek never let us." Sandra made notes. "I'll contact her tonight. If she's suitable and willing, kinship placement is always our preference." The night wore on. Tyler gave his statement to Rebecca Foster, recounting in heartbreaking detail the 2 years of abuse he'd endured. Sandra made her calls, eventually connecting with Judith Hayes, who was horrified to learn what her grandson had been suffering and immediately agreed to take him in, volunteering to drive to Bakersfield that very night. By midnight, an emergency protective order had been issued, and police had been dispatched to arrest Derek Morrison. Marcus had made a food run, returning with burgers and shakes for everyone. Tyler ate his slowly, sitting between Jax and Marcus on the uncomfortable hospital chairs, looking more relaxed than he had since they'd found him. "Why are you doing this?" Tyler asked Jax suddenly. "You don't even know me." Jax was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own complicated past, the violence he'd been part of, the redemption he'd been seeking. "Because somebody should," he finally said. "Because you asked for help, and you deserve to get it. And because maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, helping people who need it." "Are you a superhero?" Tyler asked with the earnestness only a child could muster. Marcus laughed softly. "Nah, kid. We're just people trying to do better than we did yesterday." "That's kind of what superheroes are, though," Tyler pointed out. At 1:30 in the morning, Judith Hayes arrived. She was a slim woman in her late 60s with the same sandy brown hair as Tyler, though hers was streaked heavily with gray. The moment she saw her grandson, she burst into tears and rushed to embrace him. "Oh, my baby boy," she sobbed, holding him close. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't know. I should have known. I should have—" "It's okay, Grandma," Tyler said, hugging her back fiercely. "I'm okay now." The reunification was supervised by Sandra, who went over the temporary custody arrangements, the court dates that would follow, and the requirements Judith would need to meet. Through it all, the older woman nodded, fierce determination in her eyes that matched her grandson's. As they prepared to leave, Tyler turned back to Jax and his friends. He threw his arms around Jax's waist, holding tight. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for believing me." Jax hugged him back, feeling something shift in his chest. Something that had been hardened by years of violence and loss, softening just a fraction. "You were brave today, Tyler. Braver than most adults I know. You're going to be okay. Will I see you again?" "Count on it," Jax promised. "We'll come check on you, make sure you're settling in all right." As Tyler and his grandmother drove away, heading north toward Sacramento and a new beginning, the four men stood in the hospital parking lot, watching the taillights disappear into the night. "That felt good," Nathan said quietly. "Feels like maybe we did something that actually mattered." "It's not over," Ethan cautioned. "There's still the trial, dealing with the mother's situation, making sure Morrison actually faces consequences." "Then we see it through," Jax said. "We started this. We finish it." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Who knew?" Jax Teller, champion of justice. "Don't get used to it," Jax said with a slight smile. But inside, something had changed. For years, he'd been searching for purpose beyond the violence and chaos that had defined his life. Maybe, just maybe, he'd found a glimpse of it tonight in a frightened boy's desperate plea for help. The ride back was quiet, each man lost in his own thoughts as the highway stretched before them in the darkness. But there was a sense of satisfaction, of rightness, that hadn't been there on the ride out. They'd made a difference. It was a small thing in the grand scheme of the world's problems, but to Tyler Benjamin Hayes, it was everything. And sometimes, Jax thought, as the cool night air rushed past, that was enough. The news of Derek Morrison's arrest spread through the small town of Millerton like wildfire through dry brush. By the time the sun rose over the Central Valley, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, everyone knew that something had happened at the Morrison house on the night of November 8th. Jax hadn't slept. After returning from Bakersfield around 3 in the morning, he'd gone back to his small apartment above the auto repair shop where he worked, a modest 2-bedroom space that had become his sanctuary from the chaos of his past life. But sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tyler's face, saw those bruises, heard that desperate plea for help. By 7 a.m., he'd given up and made coffee, standing at his window watching the town wake up. Millerton wasn't much, a population of barely 15,000, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business, for better or worse. The main street was a collection of small businesses struggling against the encroachment of chain stores and online shopping. The auto shop, Dawson's Auto Repair, was one of the few thriving establishments thanks to its owner, Robert James Dawson, who'd given Jax a job when no one else would. His phone buzzed. Connor Fitzgerald. "You made the local news," Connor said without preamble. "Well, the story did. Local man arrested on child abuse charges. They haven't released Tyler's name, obviously, but Derek Morrison's face is all over the internet." "Good," Jax said, taking a sip of coffee. "How bad is it going to get?" "For Morrison? Very bad. Rebecca Foster doesn't lose cases like this, especially not with the documentation you helped gather. For you? Depends. If Morrison has friends, if he's connected, they might try to spin this somehow, paint you as troublemakers who interfered. But honestly, you did everything right. Called the proper authorities, got CPS involved, didn't take matters into your own hands. Yet, Jax said quietly. "What?" "Didn't take matters into my own hands yet. If he gets out on bail, if he goes anywhere near that kid..." "Jax," Connor's voice took on a warning tone. "Don't. You've worked too hard to build a new life. Don't throw it away on a piece of garbage like Morrison." "I know. I keep thinking about what could have happened if Tyler hadn't run. If he hadn't found us. How much longer it would have gone on." But he did run. He found you, and you helped him. Take the win. After hanging up, Jax showered and dressed, then headed down to the shop. Robert was already there, a barrel-chested man in his 60s, with oil permanently embedded under his fingernails and a heart bigger than his considerable frame. He looked up from the engine he was working on as Jax entered. "Heard you had quite a night," Robert said. "News travels fast. Betty Carmichael was in the ER last night for her back. She saw you with the kid. Called her daughter, who called her sister, who posted about it on Facebook. You know how it goes." Jax sighed. Small-town life had its advantages, but privacy wasn't one of them. "Yeah, well, kid needed help." Robert wiped his hands on a rag, studying Jax with the shrewd eyes of someone who'd seen a lot of life. "You did good. Not everyone would have gotten involved. Especially not with everything you've been trying to put behind you. Maybe that's exactly why I had to get involved. Chance to prove I'm not the person I used to be. You've been proving that every day for the last 3 years, son. But I understand. Sometimes we need the big moments to believe it ourselves." The day progressed with the usual rhythm of the shop. Oil changes, brake jobs, a transmission that needed replacing. Jax lost himself in the work, finding the familiar comfort in the mechanical logic of engines. There was something pure about fixing machines. They were broken. You identified the problem. You replaced or repaired the parts, and they worked again. If only human problems were so straightforward. Marcus stopped by around noon, bringing sandwiches from Rosa's Deli down the street. They ate in the small break room, listening to the classic rock station that Robert kept playing through the shop's ancient speakers. "Ethan got a call from Rebecca Foster this morning," Marcus said between bites. "Morrison's being held on $200,000 bail. Tried to claim the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that Tyler was lying. But the medical evidence is pretty damning. What about Rachel? Tyler's mom? That's where it gets complicated. Police went to the house last night to arrest Morrison. Rachel was there. According to the report, she was hysterical, crying, defending Morrison at first, saying it wasn't his fault, that Tyler was difficult. But then, Marcus paused, pulling out his phone and scrolling to a message. Then she broke down, admitted she'd been terrified to leave, that Morrison controlled everything, their money, her phone, where she could go. She's apparently covered in bruises, too, hidden under long sleeves. Jax felt his jaw clench. So she's also a victim. Seems like it. Rebecca's office is treating her as such, at least for now. They've connected her with a domestic violence advocate and a therapist. Whether she faces charges for failure to protect Tyler, that'll depend on a lot of factors. Does Tyler know? Sandra's planning to talk to him today. She wants to arrange a supervised visit if Tyler's open to it. Let them start processing this together. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. A black sedan pulled up to the shop, and out stepped a man in an expensive suit that looked out of place in the grease-stained environment of Dawson's Auto Repair. He was tall, silver-haired, probably in his late 50s, with the kind of bearing that suggested authority and wealth. "Can I help you?" Robert called out, his tone wary. "I'm looking for Jackson Teller," the man said, his voice smooth and cultured. Jax emerged from under the hood of a Ford F-150, wiping his hands. "That's me. Who's asking?" "My name is Gregory Thomas Ashford. I'm an attorney representing Derek Morrison." The temperature in the shop seemed to drop 10 degrees. Robert positioned himself closer to Jax, a silent show of support. Marcus, who'd been about to leave, stayed put. "I have nothing to say to you," Jax said flatly. Ashford held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to intimidate or threaten. I'm simply trying to understand what happened last night." My client maintains that this is all a terrible misunderstanding. Your client is a child abuser, Jack said, his voice cold. I saw the bruises. I heard Tyler's story. I was there when the doctor cataloged 2 years' worth of systematic abuse. So you can take your misunderstanding and— Mr. Teller, Ashford interrupted smoothly, I understand you have strong feelings about this situation, but the legal system requires evidence, proper procedure. Tyler is a child. Children sometimes exaggerate, sometimes misunderstand discipline for abuse. Marcus took a step forward, his imposing frame suddenly very threatening. You need to leave. Now. Ashford's eyes flickered between the 3 men, calculating. My client is a respected member of this community. He's a shift supervisor at Thompson Agricultural Supply, has worked there for 12 years. He's never been in trouble with the law. Tyler, on the other hand, has had behavioral issues at school, fighting, talking back to teachers. Because he was being abused at home, Jack said through gritted teeth. That's what trauma does to kids. But you know that. You're just doing your job, trying to create reasonable doubt. Well, good luck with that. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence can be interpreted in different ways. A child who runs away, who approaches strangers with a story designed to gain sympathy. Get out! Robert's voice cut through the garage like a blade. This is private property, and you're not welcome here. You want to talk to Jax, you go through proper channels. Now leave before I call the sheriff. Ashford reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, holding it out. When no one took it, he set it on the nearest workbench. When this goes to trial, Mr. Teller, you'll be called as a witness. The defense will question your credibility, your history. I suggest you think carefully about your involvement in this case. After he left, the 3 men stood in silence for a moment. That was a thinly veiled threat, Marcus observed. Let him dig into my past, Jack said. I'm not hiding anything. Yeah, I've made mistakes, done things I'm not proud of, but that doesn't change what Morrison did to Tyler. Robert picked up Ashford's card and tossed it in the trash. Men like that, they think money and fancy words can make anything go away. They're usually right, but not this time. Not with that kind of evidence. The rest of the day passed without incident, but the visit from Morrison's attorney had cast a shadow. When Jax finally closed up the shop at 6, he found Ethan and Nathan waiting outside on their bikes. Heard you had a visitor, Ethan said. Word really does travel fast in this town. We figured you might need some backup. Want to take a ride? Clear your head? They rode north, away from Millerton, into the foothills where the landscape began its transition from flat agricultural land to the rolling terrain that would eventually become mountains. The November air was cool, but not yet cold, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant pine trees. The sun was setting, turning the sky into a watercolor of oranges and purples. They stopped at a scenic overlook, a small pull-off where locals sometimes came to watch the sunset. Below them, the Central Valley stretched out like a patchwork quilt. Fields and farms and small towns connected by ribbons of highway. I keep thinking about something Tyler said, Jax admitted, as they stood at the railing. He asked if I was a superhero, like helping him was some kind of extraordinary thing instead of just basic human decency. That's the world he was living in, Nathan said quietly, where adults hurt him instead of protected him, where asking for help got him punished. In that world, someone actually helping probably does seem superhuman. Ethan lit a cigarette, staring out at the view. You know what Morrison's lawyer is going to do, right? He's going to dig into all of our pasts. The club, the things we've done. He's going to try to paint us as criminals, as unreliable witnesses. Make it seem like we coached Tyler, manipulated him, "Let him try," Jack said. "The medical evidence doesn't lie. Neither do the x-rays of old fractures that were never treated." "I'm not worried about the case," Ethan continued. "Morrison's going down. But this is going to put us under a microscope. People in town are going to be asking questions about who we are, who we used to be." Marcus arrived on his bike a few minutes later, having closed up his own small business, a custom furniture workshop where he crafted pieces with surprising delicacy given his large hands. "Got an update from Sandra," he called out, dismounting. "Tyler met with his mom today, supervised visit at CPS offices." "How'd it go?" Jax asked. "About as well as you'd expect. Lots of crying on both sides. Rachel apologized, said she was sorry for not protecting him. Tyler's angry, but also, he's a kid who loves his mom. It's complicated. What's the next step?" "Rachel's entered a domestic violence shelter program. She's cooperating fully with the investigation. Sandra thinks there's a good chance Tyler could eventually be reunified with her once Rachel's completed therapy and demonstrated she can keep him safe. But that's months down the road, maybe longer. And in the meantime, he's with his grandmother?" "Yeah. Sandra did a home visit today. Said Judith's house is perfect. Safe neighborhood in Sacramento. Good schools nearby. The old lady's retired, so she's got the time to devote to Tyler. She's already enrolled him in counseling." As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge in the clear November sky, the four men talked about next steps. Rebecca Foster wanted to meet with them to prepare for the eventual trial. Connor had advised Jax to document everything, every conversation, every interaction related to the case. Sandra had asked if they'd be willing to serve as character witnesses if needed, people who could speak to Tyler's state when they found him. "We're in this now," Jax said finally. "All the way through. Tyler trusted us to help him. We don't bail just because it gets complicated." The others agreed without hesitation. Whatever their pasts, whatever mistakes they'd made, this was a chance to do something unambiguously right, to stand up for someone who couldn't stand up for himself. They rode back to Millerton under a canopy of stars, the highway mostly empty at this hour. As they reached the town limits, Jax felt his phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for saving my grandson. I don't know how to repay you. Judith Hayes." Below it was a photo. Tyler, smiling, actually smiling, holding a plate of cookies in what looked like a warm, cheerful kitchen. His bruises were still visible, but his eyes held something they hadn't before. Hope. Jax saved the photo, feeling that same shift in his chest he'd felt at the hospital. This was why they'd done it. This moment, this smile, this child who'd been given a chance at a better life. Sometimes, he thought, as he pulled into his parking space, redemption wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a series of small choices, difficult actions, commitments to see things through even when they got messy. He'd spent years trying to outrun his past, trying to prove he was different. Maybe he'd finally found the path forward. 3 weeks after Tyler's rescue, the Central Valley was experiencing an unseasonably cold November. The morning Jax drove to Sacramento to check on Tyler. Frost covered the fields along Highway 99, and his breath formed clouds in the early morning air. He'd borrowed Robert's truck for the journey, knowing it would be more appropriate than arriving on his motorcycle. Judith Hayes lived in a modest neighborhood called Curtis Park, an older area of Sacramento characterized by tree-lined streets and well-maintained houses that had been built in the 1920s and 30s. Her house was a charming craftsman-style home, painted pale yellow with white trim, surrounded by a tidy garden that even in late fall showed signs of careful maintenance. Jax had called ahead, and Judith opened the door before he'd even reached the porch. She was wearing a cardigan and jeans, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her face, lined with age and worry, brightened when she saw him. "Mr. Teller," she said warmly, ushering him inside. "Please come in. Tyler's been asking about you constantly. I swear you'd think you were a celebrity." The inside of the house was everything a grandmother's home should be. Warm, lived in, filled with family photos and comfortable furniture that had been chosen for coziness rather than style. The scent of baking cookies filled the air. And somewhere in the house, Jax could hear the sound of a television playing cartoons. "Tyler!" Judith called. "You have a visitor!" The sound of running feet preceded Tyler's appearance. He skidded into the living room, his face lighting up when he saw Jax. The bruises had faded to yellow-green, barely visible now. He'd gained weight. His face was fuller, healthier. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The haunted, terrified look was gone, replaced by the normal energy of a 9-year-old boy. "Jax!" Tyler launched himself forward, and Jax caught him in a hug. "You came. I didn't know if you'd really come." "I promised, didn't I?" Jax said, ruffling his hair. "How you doing, kid?" "Good. Really good. Grandma lets me have cookies before dinner. And my room has all these cool books. And I'm going to a new school next week. They have a really good soccer program." Judith smiled, though Jax could see the sheen of tears in her eyes. He's doing remarkably well, all things considered. The therapist says he's resilient. Of course, he still has nightmares sometimes. And he won't go near the basement. Too many bad memories of being punished in the one at his old house. But overall, he's adjusting beautifully. They sat in the living room, and Judith served coffee and fresh chocolate chip cookies. Tyler positioned himself on the couch next to Jax, close enough that their shoulders touched, as if reassuring himself that Jax was really there. "I saw your mom last week," Judith said quietly, her expression complicated. "At the supervised visitation center. It was difficult." Tyler's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Mom cries a lot," he said. "She keeps saying she's sorry. I told her it's okay, but..." He trailed off, struggling with emotions too complex for his age. "But it's not okay," Jax finished gently. "Not yet. Maybe someday. But right now, you're allowed to be angry and hurt. My therapist says the same thing, Dr. Patterson. She's pretty cool. She has this office with all these toys and games, and we play while we talk. She says it's normal to have complicated feelings about Mom." Judith set down her coffee cup with a soft clink. "Rachel is in a good program. She's taking it seriously. Therapy, the parenting classes, the job training. She wants to get Tyler back. But that's going to be a long road. Right now, I have temporary guardianship. The hearing for more permanent arrangements is in 3 months. How are you feeling about all of it?" Jax asked Tyler directly. The boy thought carefully before answering. A habit Jax suspected came from years of having to weigh every word before speaking in Derek's presence. "I miss my mom. The mom she was before Derek. And I think she can be that person again. Maybe. Without him making her scared all the time. But I like living here. Grandma doesn't yell. She doesn't hit. I don't have to walk on eggshells." The phrase "walk on eggshells" coming from a 9-year-old's mouth was heartbreaking in its adult understanding. "You're safe here," Jax confirmed. "That's what matters most." They spent the morning together. Tyler gave Jax a tour of his room, a bright space with posters of soccer players on the walls and a bookshelf filled with age-appropriate books. Judith had clearly spared no expense in making him comfortable. There was a desk for homework, a comfortable reading chair, even a small telescope by the window for stargazing. "Grandma says we can go camping next summer," Tyler said excitedly. "I've never been camping. We're going to go to Yosemite and see the big trees and maybe see bears from far away, where they're safe." Over lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, Judith asked Jax about the upcoming trial. "It's scheduled for January," Jax said. Rebecca Foster is confident. "The evidence is overwhelming, and Derek's attorney hasn't been able to poke any real holes in the case. Morrison's been denied bail reduction twice." "Good," Judith said fiercely. "That monster should never see the light of day again." "Grandma," Tyler said quietly, "Dr. Patterson says I shouldn't call Derek names, that it gives him power. She says he's just a person who made very bad choices and is going to face consequences." Judith reached over and squeezed her grandson's hand. "You're right, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Your therapist is very smart." After lunch, Tyler asked if Jax wanted to play soccer in the backyard. They spent an hour kicking the ball around, with Tyler demonstrating the moves he'd been practicing. His laughter rang out clear and genuine, the sound of a child who was finally allowed to be a child. As the afternoon wore on and it came time for Jax to leave, Tyler's mood sobered. "Will you come back?" he asked, that old fear flickering briefly in his eyes. "As often as I can," Jax promised. "And hey, you have my number. If you ever need to talk, anytime, you call me. Deal?" "Deal." Judith walked Jax to his truck. Once they were out of Tyler's earshot, her expression turned serious. "Mr. Teller, Jax, I can never thank you enough for what you did. When I think about what could have happened, if Tyler hadn't found you—" She paused, composing herself. "I failed my grandson. I knew Rachel's relationship with Derek wasn't healthy. I tried to talk to her about it, but he'd isolated her so completely. And I never let myself imagine that it was this bad, that Tyler was suffering." "You didn't know," Jax said. "Abusers are good at hiding what they do. They manipulate. They isolate. They make victims afraid to reach out. This isn't on you. Perhaps. But I won't fail him again. He has a home here for as long as he needs it. Permanently, if that's what's best. I'm 70 years old, but I'm healthy, and I have enough saved for both of us. Tyler will never want for anything. He's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other. And we're lucky you were in that gas station on that particular day." She paused. "I've been reading about you, about your past with the motorcycle club, some of the incidents." Jax tensed. "Yeah, I'm not proud of everything I've done. I'm not judging. I'm thanking. Because whatever you were before, whatever mistakes you made, when it mattered, when my grandson needed someone, you were exactly the right person in the right place. Sometimes redemption looks like a second chance to do the right thing. You took it." The drive back to Millerton gave Jax time to think. Seeing Tyler thriving, laughing, playing, it reinforced why they'd gotten involved. But Judith's words about redemption stuck with him. Was that what this was? A chance to balance the scales? His phone rang as he hit the outskirts of Millerton. Rebecca Foster. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Morrison's attorney is filing a motion to suppress Tyler's initial statement." "On what grounds?" "They're claiming that you and your friends intimidated Tyler, coached his testimony, that he was scared and said what you wanted to hear to avoid being turned over to Morrison." Jax's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That's complete bullshit. Tyler came to us. We did everything by the book." "I know. And the motion will fail. But it's going to drag you deeper into this. Ashford is going to depose you, question you about your background, your motivations. He's going to try to paint you as a vigilante, someone with a savior complex, or worse. Let him. I've got nothing to hide." "Everyone has something to hide, Jax. I need you to meet with me and my investigator. We need to go through your entire history, everything that Ashford might use against you. If there are any skeletons in your closet, I need to know about them before he does." They scheduled a meeting for the following day. When Jax arrived at Rebecca's office in Bakersfield, a modest space in a building that housed several attorneys' offices, he found her waiting with a man in his early 50s, fit and sharp-eyed. "This is Daniel Marcus Wright, my investigator," Rebecca introduced. Dan was a detective with Bakersfield PD for 25 years before retiring. They spent 3 hours going through Jax's life. His time with the motorcycle club, the fights, the arrests for assault and weapons charges, the things he'd done that had never been officially pinned on him. His father's death, his mother's struggles with addiction, the relationships that had failed, the friends he'd lost to violence or prison. "I'm not going to lie to you," Rebecca said when they were done. "Ashford is going to make you look bad. He's going to suggest that you have a history of violence, that you're not a credible witness, that you inserted yourself into this situation for your own purposes." "What purposes?" Jax asked, frustrated. "What possible reason would I have for making any of this up?" "He'll imply you're seeking attention, or that you have something against Morrison personally, or that you're the type who gets off on playing hero. It doesn't have to make sense, Jax. It just has to create doubt. But the medical evidence is compelling and will convict Morrison. But your testimony about Tyler's emotional state, about what he said to you at that gas station, about his fear, that's part of building the full picture. And if Ashford can discredit you, he weakens that picture." Daniel leaned forward. "The good news is, your life for the last 3 years is clean. Steady employment, no arrests, no incidents. You've been rebuilding. And the fact that you immediately called CPS, that you followed protocol, that you didn't take matters into your own hands, that all works in your favor." "What about Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan?" Jax asked. "We're deposing them too. Marcus's record is clean. Guy's been a model citizen his whole life. Nathan has some juvenile stuff, but nothing as an adult. Ethan's military record is complicated, but ultimately honorable discharge. You're actually the biggest concern, Jax. Your past is the most colorful." Over the next 2 weeks, the legal machinery ground forward. Depositions were taken, motions were filed and argued. Thanksgiving came and went. Jax spent it at Robert's house, surrounded by Robert's large extended family, feeling both grateful for the inclusion and acutely aware of everything he'd lost over the years. He visited Tyler again, the week after Thanksgiving. The boy was settling into his new school, already making friends. He showed Jax drawings he'd made in art class. Bright, cheerful images of houses and families and soccer games. So different from the dark, chaotic scribbles that Dr. Patterson had shown Judith from Tyler's early therapy sessions. "I'm testifying at the trial," Tyler told him matter-of-factly. They were in his room, building a complicated Lego set together. "Dr. Patterson is helping me prepare. She says I just have to tell the truth about what happened." "That's right," Jax confirmed. "Just the truth. That's all anyone can ask. Derek's lawyer is going to try to make me seem like a liar. Rebecca explained it to me. She said he might ask me mean questions. But you'll have people there supporting you. Me, your grandma, your mom." "Mom's testifying too," Tyler interrupted. "Against Derek. Rebecca says she's a really important witness because she saw everything. Rachel's transformation over the past month had been remarkable, according to Sandra. Away from Morrison's control, she'd rediscovered her strength. She'd gotten a job at a local grocery store, was attending support groups, and had been completely honest about her own failures to protect Tyler. The DA's office had decided not to press charges against her, recognizing her as another victim of Morrison's abuse. The mother-son visits had gotten easier. Tyler was still angry, still hurt, but he was also starting to understand the complexity of domestic violence, how it trapped people, how fear could paralyze even a parent's protective instincts. December arrived with unexpected rain, turning the usually brown landscape green. The trial date loomed closer. Jax found himself increasingly anxious, not about testifying. He'd told the truth and would continue to tell it, but about Tyler having to relive his trauma in a courtroom. One evening, Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan gathered at Jax's apartment. They ordered pizza and sat around discussing the trial. "I've been thinking," Nathan said, "about what happens after. After Morrison's convicted and Tyler's life settles down. Do we just walk away?" "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "I mean, we changed this kid's life. We're part of his story now. But once the trial's over, do we just disappear? Go back to our normal lives and leave him to his?" Jax had been wondering the same thing. "Tyler asked me to come to his first soccer game in January, after the trial. Judith invited me to Christmas dinner," Marcus admitted. "Said Tyler wanted all of us there." "We can't just ghost him," Ethan said firmly. "He's attached to us. He sees us as the people who saved him. We've got a responsibility to see this through, to be present in his life, at least for a while, until he's more stable." They all agreed. Whatever their original intentions, they were now woven into Tyler's recovery. They would see it through. The week before the trial, Jax received a letter. It was addressed to him at the auto shop, forwarded from the police department. Inside was a single page, handwritten in shaky block letters. "Mr. Teller, you don't know me. My name is David Chen. I'm 12 years old. I read about Tyler Hayes in the news, about how you helped him. I just wanted to say thank you. Not for me, but for kids like me and Tyler. Sometimes adults don't believe us. Sometimes they don't care. You believed Tyler. You cared. That gives me hope that maybe someday someone will believe me too. Thank you for being a good person." Jax sat at his workbench for a long time, staring at that letter. Somewhere in Millerton or the surrounding area was another child suffering in silence, hoping someone would notice, someone would care. How many David Chens were out there? How many Tylers who never found someone at a gas station willing to help? He couldn't save them all, but he'd saved one. And maybe, just maybe, that would inspire someone else to pay attention, to take action, to believe a child's desperate plea for help. The night before the trial, Jax couldn't sleep. He stood at his window, looking out over the quiet streets of Millerton, and thought about the path that had led him here. The violence, the mistakes, the losses, but also the redemption, the rebuilding, the chance to be someone better than who he'd been. Tomorrow, he would walk into a courtroom and tell Tyler's story. He would face Derek Morrison's attorney and whatever attacks on his character might come. And he would do it because a 9-year-old boy had been brave enough to ask for help, and because sometimes redemption looked like simply showing up when it mattered most. The Kern County Superior Courthouse was an imposing building of concrete and glass, modern and austere, designed to convey the weight and authority of the law. On the morning of January 12th, as Jax climbed the steps alongside Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan, he felt the gravity of what was about to happen settle over him like a physical weight. Inside, the hallways were crowded with people. Attorneys in suits carrying briefcases, families waiting for various hearings, the everyday machinery of justice grinding forward. Rebecca Foster met them outside courtroom 5, looking professional in a charcoal gray suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp features. "Morrison's here," she said quietly. His attorney arrived early, probably trying to establish some kind of psychological advantage. "Tyler and Judith are in the witness waiting room. I'm keeping them separate from the general population. Rachel's here too, looking nervous, but determined. "How's Tyler?" Jax asked, scared but ready. Dr. Patterson spent yesterday afternoon with him, doing final preparation. He knows what to expect. We're calling him as the second witness, right after the first responding officer. I want the jury to hear his story early, before Morrison's attorney has a chance to muddy the waters. The courtroom itself was modern, with wood paneling and fluorescent lighting that gave everything a slightly harsh quality. The jury box was empty, waiting to be filled. Judge Elizabeth Marie Thornton, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and a reputation for fairness and no-nonsense courtroom management, would be presiding. Jax, Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan took seats in the gallery behind the prosecution's table. Slowly, the courtroom filled. Members of the press. This case had garnered local media attention, though Tyler's identity was being protected. Social workers from CPS, including Sandra Mitchell, some of Robert Dawson's family, showing support. And then, across the aisle, the defense side. Derek Morrison looked different from how Jax had imagined. He'd built up this monster in his mind, but the man who walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles was disappointingly ordinary. Average height, thinning brown hair, a face that could belong to anyone. Your neighbor, your coworker, the guy ahead of you in line at the grocery store. That was the insidious thing about abusers, Jax realized. They didn't wear signs. They looked like everyone else. Morrison's eyes scanned the courtroom, and when they landed on Jax, something flashed across his face. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. Gregory Ashford, his attorney, leaned over and whispered something to him, and Morrison's expression smoothed into carefully maintained neutrality. "All rise," the bailiff called. "The Superior Court of Kern County is now in session. The Honorable Elizabeth Thornton presiding." Judge Thornton entered with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried herself with an authority that made her seem much larger. "Be seated," she said, settling into her chair. "We're here for the trial of People versus Derek William Morrison, case number CR 2024-8756. Counsel, state your appearances for the record." Rebecca stood. "Rebecca Lynn Foster for the People, Your Honor." Ashford rose smoothly. "Gregory Thomas Ashford for the defendant, Your Honor." What followed was the procedural ballet of jury selection. 12 jurors and 2 alternates were chosen from a pool of 40 potential jurors. Ashford used his challenges to eliminate anyone who worked with children or had any connection to child welfare services. Rebecca struck anyone who seemed overly sympathetic to law enforcement criticism or skeptical of children's testimony. By the time the jury was sworn in, 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from mid-20s to late 60s, a reasonable cross-section of Kern County, it was nearly 1 in the afternoon. After a lunch recess, opening statements began. Rebecca approached the jury with her notes, though Jack suspected she didn't really need them. She'd prosecuted dozens of abuse cases. She knew how to build a narrative. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice clear and steady, "over the next several days, you're going to hear about a little boy named Tyler Benjamin Hayes. You're going to hear about the 2 years he spent living in fear, suffering daily abuse at the hands of his stepfather, Derek Morrison. You're going to see medical evidence, photographs of bruises, x-rays of fractures. You're going to hear from doctors, social workers, and law enforcement. But most importantly, you're going to hear from Tyler himself." She paused, making eye contact with each juror. "The defense is going to try to tell you this is complicated, that Tyler is a difficult child, that what happened was discipline gone too far, or accidents or misunderstandings. But the evidence will show you that this was systematic, prolonged child abuse. Tyler didn't fall down the stairs once. He was pushed. He didn't accidentally break his arm. It was twisted until it fractured. He didn't get those bruises from being clumsy. He got them from being hit, grabbed, thrown against walls. Rebecca's voice grew harder. And when it became too much, when Tyler couldn't take another day of it, he ran. He ran for miles, terrified and hurting, until he found someone he hoped would help him. And thank God, he found people who did help, who believed him, who called the proper authorities, who made sure he was safe. She turned, gesturing toward Morrison. Derek Morrison is an abuser. The evidence will prove that beyond any reasonable doubt. And at the end of this trial, I'm going to ask you to hold him accountable for what he did to a defenseless child. Ashford's opening statement was predictably different in tone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and reasonable, "no one is disputing that Tyler Hayes had some injuries. No one is saying that Derek Morrison is a perfect parent. But what the prosecution is asking you to believe is that my client is a monster, and that's simply not supported by the facts." He moved closer to the jury box. Derek Morrison is a working man. He took on the responsibility of raising someone else's child when he married Rachel Hayes. Tyler was 6 years old, already dealing with the trauma of losing his father. He was acting out, fighting at school, being defiant at home. Derek tried his best to provide structure, discipline. Was he perfect? No. Did he sometimes lose his temper? Perhaps. But that's a far cry from the systematic abuse the prosecution wants you to believe occurred. Ashford's expression became sympathetic. You're going to hear from Mr. Teller and his friends, these motorcycle club members who inserted themselves into a family situation they didn't understand. You're going to hear about Tyler running away, not for the first time, by the way, and telling these strangers a story designed to get their sympathy, to avoid being taken home where he'd face consequences for running away. Children sometimes exaggerate. They sometimes misremember. And when well-meaning but misguided adults encourage those exaggerations, coach those memories, suddenly a complicated family situation becomes a criminal case. Jax felt his jaw clench. The lawyer was good. He'd give him that. He was planting seeds of doubt, creating an alternative narrative. At the end of this trial, Ashford concluded, I'm going to ask you to look at all the evidence critically. Ask yourselves, is this really the monster the prosecution describes? Or is this a man who tried his best in a difficult situation and is now being railroaded by an overzealous system and a child's frightened fantasies? The first witness was Officer Brandon Keith Matthews, who'd responded to the Morrison house the night of Derek's arrest. He testified about finding Rachel Hayes in a state of distress, about the visible bruises on her arms, about Morrison's belligerent attitude. He kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding, Officer Matthews said, that Tyler was a troubled kid who made up stories. But when we asked to see Tyler's room, Mr. Morrison became agitated, told us we needed a warrant, which, given the circumstances and the emergency protective order, we didn't. What did you find in Tyler's room? Rebecca asked. It was sparse, a mattress on the floor, no sheets, a few items of clothing. The window had been nailed shut from the outside, and there was a lock on the outside of the door, the kind used to keep someone in, not out. A ripple went through the courtroom. Ashford objected. Speculation about the purpose of the lock, Your Honor. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. Then it was Tyler's turn. The courtroom fell silent as the bailiff escorted him in. He looked tiny in the large courtroom, wearing khaki pants and a button-up shirt that Judith had clearly bought for the occasion. His sandy brown hair was neatly combed, but it was his face that drew Jax's attention, set with a determination that seemed heartbreaking on someone so young. Judge Thornton's expression softened. "Tyler, do you know what it means to tell the truth?" "Yes, ma'am." His voice was small but steady. "It means saying what really happened, not what someone wants you to say, or what might get you in less trouble. And do you promise to tell the truth today?" "I promise." Rebecca approached gently. "Tyler, I know this is scary. If you need a break at any time, you just let me know, okay?" He nodded. "Can you tell the jury who Derek Morrison is?" Tyler's eyes flicked toward the defense table, and for a moment, fear crossed his face. But then he found Jax in the gallery, and something steadied in his expression. "He's my stepdad. He married my mom when I was 7. And how did Derek treat you?" For the next hour, Tyler recounted his life with Derek Morrison. He spoke about the escalation of abuse, how it started with harsh words, then moved to grabbing, pushing, hitting, how Derek would lock him in his room for hours, sometimes overnight, how food was used as punishment, meals withheld if Tyler didn't complete chores to Derek's satisfaction, how Derek forbade Rachel from comforting Tyler when he cried, calling him weak, a baby. Tyler's voice remained steady through most of it, though tears streamed down his face when he described the night Derek pushed him down the stairs. "I was so scared," he said quietly. "My arm hurt really bad. I thought it might be broken. But Derek said, if I told anyone, if I went to the hospital, he'd make sure I regretted it. He said nobody would believe me anyway, that I was just a clumsy kid. And I believed him." Ashford's cross-examination was brutal but controlled. He tried to poke holes in Tyler's timeline, suggest his memory was faulty, imply that Jax and his friends had coached him. But Tyler held firm, his voice never wavering from the truth. "Did Mr. Teller tell you what to say?" Ashford asked. "No, sir. He told me to tell the truth. That's what I'm doing." "But you ran away before, didn't you? You have a history of being defiant." "I ran away once before, to my friend's house down the street. I was gone for 2 hours before Derek found me. When he brought me home, he locked me in my room for 3 days. After that, I was too scared to try again. Until that day. When Tyler stepped down, Judith was there to embrace him. Jax saw the relief on the boy's face. He'd done it, faced his abuser in court, and told his truth. The prosecution's case continued. Dr. Helen Carson testified about Tyler's injuries, presenting photographs that made several jurors visibly uncomfortable. X-rays showing the healed fractures. Medical evidence that contradicted any possibility of these being accidents. Sandra Mitchell testified about the home visit, about the lock on Tyler's door, about the deplorable conditions. Officer Matthews provided additional testimony about Morrison's behavior during the arrest. And then, on the second day, Rachel Hayes took the stand. She looked different from the woman described in the police reports, stronger somehow, though still fragile. She wore a simple dress and minimal makeup, and her hands trembled as she was sworn in. Rebecca's examination was gentle but thorough. Rachel admitted her failures, tears streaming down her face as she described watching her son suffer and feeling powerless to stop it. "Derek controlled everything," she said, her voice breaking. "Our money, my phone, where I could go. If I tried to protect Tyler, Derek would... He'd take it out on both of us later. He said if I ever tried to leave, he'd make sure I never saw Tyler again. He said he'd tell everyone I was an unfit mother, that I was crazy. And I believed him. I was so scared." "Did Derek ever hurt you physically?" Rebecca asked. Rachel nodded, pulling up her sleeves to show faded bruises, still visible months later. "All the time. He was careful. Places that wouldn't show. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd kill me. And I believed that too. Ashford's cross-examination tried to paint Rachel as complicit, as someone who chose her own safety over her child's. But Rebecca's redirect was devastating. "Ms. Hayes, do you take responsibility for failing to protect Tyler?" "Every single day," Rachel whispered. "It's the biggest regret of my life. I should have been braver. I should have found a way. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to him." On the third day, it was Jax's turn. He'd testified before, in criminal proceedings related to his club days, in civil suits. But this felt different. More important, he was representing Tyler's moment of salvation, the pivot point where everything changed. Rebecca's direct examination was straightforward. She walked him through finding Tyler at the gas station, the boy's condition, what he said, the decisions they made to contact CPS, rather than taking matters into their own hands. "Why did you help him?" Rebecca asked. Jax looked at the jury. "Because he asked. Because he was a scared kid who needed someone to believe him. And because..." He paused. "Because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Done things I'm not proud of. But when someone needs help, when a child is being hurt, you don't walk away. You do what's right." Then came Ashford's cross-examination. "Mr. Teller, you have quite an extensive criminal record, don't you?" "I have a past, yes." "Assault? Weapons charges? Conspiracy? You were a member of a motorcycle club involved in illegal activities, correct?" "I was part of a club that had some members who made bad choices. I've served my time for my own mistakes." "So you're a violent man who fell into the role of savior when you encountered my client's stepson." "Objection," Rebecca interjected. "Argumentative." "Sustained." "Rephrase, Mr. Ashford." Ashford adjusted. "Isn't it possible that you saw an opportunity to play hero? That you encouraged Tyler's story? Maybe even exaggerated what you saw?" "No," Jax said firmly. "Tyler's bruises were real. His fear was real. I didn't exaggerate anything. I called the proper authorities and let them do their jobs. But you inserted yourself into this situation. You could have simply called the police and let them handle it." "I could have. But Tyler was terrified of the police. Terrified that what happened before would happen again. That he'd be sent home and punished for speaking up. So I called someone I trusted to handle it right. And she did." "You're not a trained social worker or child psychologist. How do you know Tyler wasn't lying or exaggerating?" Jax met Ashford's eyes steadily. "I know what fear looks like. I know what abuse looks like. And I know that 9-year-old kids don't run 8 miles in terror because they're afraid of normal discipline. Tyler was desperate, and he was telling the truth. Everything that's come out since has proven that." Ashford tried several more angles, but Jax didn't waver. He answered honestly about his past, admitted his mistakes, but never backed down from what he knew to be true about Tyler's situation. Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan testified similarly, their accounts corroborating Jax's and adding detail to the picture of Tyler's condition when they found him. The defense's case was weaker. Morrison didn't testify. Ashford advised against it, knowing that cross-examination would be brutal. Instead, they called character witnesses. Morrison's supervisor from work, who said he was reliable and professional. A neighbor who said he seemed like a normal guy. A former teacher of Tyler's who mentioned he'd had behavioral issues. But Rebecca systematically dismantled each testimony on cross-examination, pointing out that abusers often maintain normal public personas. That Tyler's behavioral issues were symptoms of trauma, not evidence of being a bad kid. On the final day, closing arguments encapsulated everything. Rebecca stood before the jury, her voice ringing with conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case is overwhelming. You've seen the photographs, the medical records. You've heard from Tyler himself, from his mother, from the first responders. Derek Morrison systematically abused a child in his care for 2 years. He locked him in his room, withheld food, beat him, broke his arm. And when Tyler finally found the courage to run, to ask for help, Mr. Morrison's first instinct was to lie, to cover up, to blame the victim. She paused, making eye contact with each juror. The defense wants you to believe that this is complicated, that Tyler is troubled, that maybe Mr. Morrison just disciplined him too harshly. But there's nothing complicated about locking a 9-year-old in his room for days. There's nothing complicated about breaking a child's arm and refusing to get medical treatment. There's nothing complicated about systematic abuse. Her voice grew softer, but more intense. Tyler Hayes is a survivor. He survived 2 years of hell. He found the courage to run, to ask for help from strangers. And now he's finding the courage to rebuild his life. But Derek Morrison needs to be held accountable. He needs to face consequences for what he did. I'm asking you to find him guilty on all counts, to send the message that in our community, we protect children, we believe them, and we hold abusers responsible. Ashford's closing was a last-ditch attempt to create doubt, to paint Morrison as a flawed but not criminal stepfather, to suggest the evidence could be interpreted differently. But even he seemed to know it was a losing battle. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged woman who'd been an elementary school teacher for 20 years, stood with the verdict form in hand. In the matter of the people versus Derek William Morrison, on the count of felony child abuse, we find the defendant guilty. Morrison's face went white. The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Thornton gavelled for order. There were multiple counts, each instance of abuse that could be proven, each act of cruelty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. When it was over, Derek William Morrison had been convicted on 17 counts of felony child abuse, 3 counts of assault causing bodily injury to a child, and 1 count of false imprisonment. Judge Thornton scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later, but revoked bail. Morrison would remain in custody. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Rebecca gave a brief statement praising Tyler's courage and the thoroughness of the investigation. Sandra stood with Judith and Tyler, shielding the boy from cameras. Jax and his friends stayed on the periphery, not seeking attention. This wasn't about them. It was about Tyler, about justice, about holding an abuser accountable. Tyler broke away from his grandmother and ran to Jax, throwing his arms around him. "We won," he said, his voice muffled against Jax's chest. "He can't hurt me anymore." "No, kid," Jax said, hugging him back. "He can't. You're safe now." Rachel approached hesitantly, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you," she said to Jax. "Thank you for doing what I couldn't, for protecting my son when I failed to." "You're protecting him now," Jax said. "That's what matters." Moving forward. As they prepared to leave, a woman approached, middle-aged, professional-looking, carrying a reporter's notebook. "Mr. Teller, I'm Jennifer Ann Sullivan from the Bakersfield Register. Could I ask you a few questions?" Jax hesitated, but something in her expression seemed genuine, not sensationalistic. "People are calling you a hero," she said. "How does that feel?" "I'm not a hero," Jax said. "I just did what anyone should do, believed a kid who asked for help. If there's a hero in this story, it's Tyler. He's the one who had the courage to run, to speak up, to face his abuser in court. That's real bravery. What do you want people to take away from this case?" Jax thought for a moment. That child abuse happens everywhere, to kids from all kinds of families. That we all have a responsibility to pay attention, to listen when kids tell us something's wrong, and that the system can work when people use it right, when social workers and prosecutors and advocates all do their jobs with the child's best interest in mind. The article ran 3 days later, a thoughtful piece about Tyler's case and the broader issue of child abuse in California. It mentioned that according to recent data, more than 546,000 children nationally were victims of abuse and neglect in 2023, with thousands of cases in California alone. The article emphasized the importance of community vigilance and the crucial role of mandated reporters and concerned citizens. But it also told Tyler's story, how one boy's desperate plea for help had been answered, how justice had been served, and how a community had come together to protect a child. Sentencing day arrived on a cold February morning. The Central Valley was experiencing one of its rare rainy periods, and the courthouse steps were slick with water as Jax, Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan climbed them for what they hoped would be the final time in this case. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Victim advocates, social workers, members of the press, and community members who'd followed the case all filled the gallery. Tyler was there with Judith, dressed in his best clothes, looking nervous but determined. Rachel sat nearby, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Derek Morrison was brought in wearing his orange jumpsuit, his face haggard from weeks in jail. The man who'd once inspired terror now looked diminished, defeated. His attorney sat beside him, knowing there was little left to argue. Judge Thornton took her seat, her expression grave. "Before I impose sentence," she said, "I'm going to hear victim impact statements. Ms. Hayes, I understand both you and Tyler wish to address the court?" Rachel stood first, her voice shaking but growing stronger as she spoke. "Your Honor, I want to start by saying that I take responsibility for my failures as a mother. I should have protected Tyler. I should have left Derek the first time he showed violence. I was trapped, emotionally, financially, psychologically. But that doesn't excuse letting my son suffer." She turned toward Morrison, facing him directly for the first time. "Derek, you took everything from me, my confidence, my safety, my relationship with my son, but you didn't break us. Tyler is strong and brave and good, despite everything you did to him. And I'm rebuilding my life, becoming the mother he deserves. We're going to be okay. We're going to be better than okay. And you're going to have to live with what you've done." Then, it was Tyler's turn. Jax watched as the boy approached the podium, standing on a step stool so he could reach the microphone. For a moment, Tyler just stood there, looking at Morrison. "I used to be really scared of you," Tyler said, his young voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "You made me feel small and worthless. You made me think that I deserved to be hurt, that I was bad. But my therapist helped me understand that none of it was my fault. You were the adult. You were supposed to take care of me, and instead, you hurt me." His voice wavered, but didn't break. "I'm not scared of you anymore. You're just a person who made really bad choices, and now you have to face consequences. I hope that someday you understand how much you hurt me and my mom. I hope you feel sorry for real. Not just sorry you got caught. But even if you don't, I'm going to be okay. I have people who love me and protect me, and I'm never going to let anyone hurt me like that again." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Judge Thornton had to pause to compose herself before continuing. "Mr. Morrison, do you wish to make a statement?" Morrison stood slowly. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually apologize, take responsibility. But then he spoke. "I never meant to hurt anyone. Tyler was a difficult child, and I was trying to provide discipline and structure. Everything got blown out of proportion." "Mr. Morrison," Judge Thornton cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade, I've sat on this bench for 18 years. I've heard every excuse, every justification, every attempt to minimize abuse. What you did to Tyler Hayes was not discipline. It was systematic, calculated cruelty. You broke his arm and denied him medical care. You locked him in his room for days. You terrorized a child who should have been able to trust you. She opened the sentencing memorandum in front of her. I've reviewed the probation report, the psychological evaluations, the victim impact statements. The prosecution has recommended 40 years in state prison. The defense has argued for leniency, citing your lack of prior criminal history. I've given this considerable thought. The courtroom held its breath. Derek William Morrison, I hereby sentence you to 35 years in California State Prison, to be served consecutively on the most serious counts. You will be required to complete a batterer's intervention program and psychological counseling, though I hold little hope it will make a difference. You will have no contact with Tyler Hayes or Rachel Hayes. Ever. Morrison's shoulders slumped. 35 years meant he'd be an old man when released, if he survived that long in prison. Child abusers didn't fare well behind bars. As bailiffs led Morrison away, he turned back once, his eyes finding Tyler. The boy met his gaze steadily, unflinching. Morrison looked away first. Outside, the rain had stopped, and weak February sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Tyler ran ahead, jumping in puddles with the unself-conscious joy of a child who'd been given his childhood back. What happens now? Nathan asked, watching him play. Life, Jax said. Tyler goes back to his school, his soccer, his therapy. Rachel continues her program, works toward reunification. The world keeps turning. And us? Marcus asked. We keep our promises. We said we'd be there for Tyler, so we are. For as long as he needs us. Over the following months, that's exactly what they did. Jax made the drive to Sacramento once a month, attended Tyler's soccer games, took him and Judith out for dinner. Marcus crafted a beautiful wooden desk for Tyler's room, perfect for homework and art projects. Ethan helped Judith navigate the complexities of the guardianship process and eventual reunification planning. Nathan taught Tyler some basic motorcycle safety, promising that when he was old enough, they'd teach him to ride properly. Rachel completed her domestic violence program and underwent intensive therapy. She found a job as the administrative assistant at a medical office, something that gave her independence and purpose. The supervised visits with Tyler gradually became unsupervised, then overnight visits. There were setbacks, moments when old fears resurfaced, when Tyler's anger at her failures bubbled up. But they worked through it with the help of family therapy. By June, 8 months after that fateful day at the gas station, the family court judge granted Rachel increased custody, with Tyler spending weekends with her in her new apartment in Sacramento. Judith remained the primary guardian, but the trajectory was clear. Reunification was possible, was happening. On Tyler's 10th birthday in July, they all gathered at Judith's house for a party. The backyard was decorated with soccer-themed decorations, and neighborhood kids Tyler had befriended ran around playing games. Rachel was there, helping Judith set up the food table, smiling genuinely for the first time in what must have felt like forever. Jax, Marcus, Ethan, and Nathan stood off to the side, watching the scene. Kids come a long way, Marcus observed, watching Tyler laughing with his friends. They all have, Ethan corrected. Tyler, Rachel, even Judith. They're becoming a family again. You guys are part of that family now, Judith said, approaching with a tray of lemonade. Whether you like it or not, you saved my grandson's life. That makes you family. Later, as the sun was setting and the party was winding down, Tyler approached Jax with something behind his back. I made you something, he said shyly, pulling out a framed drawing. It showed a boy standing with 4 men next to motorcycles, all of them smiling. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, "My heroes." "Tyler," Jack started, emotion clogging his throat. "I know you said you're not heroes," Tyler interrupted, "but you are to me. You're the people who saved me when nobody else could. So thank you." Jax pulled him into a hug, fighting back tears. "You saved yourself, kid. You had the courage to run, to ask for help. We just made sure that help got to you." As Jax drove back to Millerton that evening, the drawing carefully placed in his passenger seat, he reflected on the past 9 months. A chance encounter at a gas station had changed multiple lives. Tyler's most obviously, but also his own. He'd spent years trying to outrun his past, trying to prove he was more than the violence and mistakes that had defined his younger years. And then, a scared 9-year-old boy had given him the opportunity to be exactly the person he'd been trying to become. Someone who helped instead of hurt, who protected instead of destroyed, who showed up when it mattered. Redemption, Jax had learned, wasn't a single moment. It wasn't one grand gesture that erased all past sins. It was a series of choices, of showing up, of doing the right thing even when it was complicated or uncomfortable. It was found in the follow-through, in keeping promises, in being present for the long haul, not just the dramatic rescue. His phone buzzed with a text. Connor Fitzgerald. "Saw the article about the sentencing. You did good, man. Really good. Proud of you." Then another, from Robert at the shop. "Customer said his kid goes to school with Tyler. Says the boy is doing great. You changed that kid's life." And finally, one from Tyler himself. Judith had gotten him a phone for his birthday. "Thanks for coming to my party. You're the best. See you at my next soccer game?" Jax typed back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." As he pulled into Millerton, the small town he'd made his home, Jax felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A sense of peace, of purpose, of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The auto shop would open tomorrow, and he'd be there, fixing engines and rebuilding transmissions. But he'd also be planning that trip to Sacramento for Tyler's next game. He'd be answering if Tyler called with a question or Rachel reached out for advice. He'd be showing up over and over again for as long as they needed him, because that's what people did for family. And somewhere along the way, a scared little boy and his grandmother and his recovering mother had become exactly that. Family. The story could have ended differently. Tyler could have never found that gas station, never found people willing to believe him. Derek Morrison could have continued his abuse indefinitely, with Tyler becoming another tragic statistic in the hundreds of thousands of children who suffer abuse each year. But it didn't end that way. It ended with justice, with healing, with a child getting a second chance at the childhood that had been stolen from him. It ended with a community coming together to protect its most vulnerable members. It ended with ordinary people making the choice to do something when they witnessed injustice. And it ended with 4 men on motorcycles proving that heroes don't wear capes or possess superpowers. Sometimes heroes are just people who show up when a scared kid asks for help, who stay when things get complicated, and who prove through their actions that change is possible, both for those who need rescuing and for those seeking redemption. As Jax parked his bike and headed up to his apartment, he paused to look at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. Somewhere in Sacramento, Tyler was probably being tucked into bed, safe and loved and surrounded by people who would protect him. That thought, more than anything else in his complicated life, felt like enough. It felt like purpose. It felt like redemption. It felt like home.